Hi, welcome to Calculating Your Time-Space Percentage, the Power of Knowing Your Numbers. I am delighted that so many folks are kind of clueless about this and are showing up to get more information and take better care of their business by knowing this stuff. And I think we might have a historic moment for our webinars, for our business practice stuff. I'm going to give a special shout out to Iowa, because I know we've got some folks from Iowa that actually joined us here in Wisconsin to get this knowledge, and actually had folks promote this webinar through their CCR&R in Iowa. And so we're really excited about that, and hope that you get everything you need out of your time with us tonight. Like Andrea said, as you know, if you've ever been with a training with me in person, I really vibe on reading faces and body language, and none of that is possible in a webinar, which makes it a little tricky for me. So the way we get around that is by being very serious about inviting your questions. And so please don't raise your hand if you've got a question, just type it in the box. Andrea and I have a system worked out where she will shoot off fireworks, and then I will look up and she will let me know what the question is so that we can make sure that we answer those. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are working to advance the slide. There we go. So this is going to be a little raise your hand when you see how you feel represented in these photos. Maybe that's how you feel. Maybe it's more like this, especially around tax time coming up in the next week. Or maybe it's this one. Having a little difficulty making it go forward.
It worked before.
It sure did.
Here, I'll advance it for you.
There we go. Thanks. So maybe that's how you're feeling. Or maybe it's this next one. Andrea, could you? So I'm hoping that even if that's not how you're feeling, by the end of this webinar, you will feel empowered that you know what you're doing, you know how to calculate it, you can actually check your tax person's calculations and make sure they're doing it right. If you're doing your own taxes, that you have the information you need to be able to get this done in a way that works for you and that is accurate. All right, Andrea, I guess I'm going to have to give you the sign because now it's not working.
Take your mouse and point it at the page and click on it. Does that not help?
We got it. All right, this is why we do this stuff live. It's so exciting to see if the technology is actually going to work. All right, so for those of you who are wondering, what is a time-space percentage? I've heard of it. I sort of know. I've read about it I've seen Tom Copeland maybe talk about it. The time-space percentage, or in shorthand is T/S percentage sign, is a mathematical computation. Do not let that scare you. We will walk it through so that it makes perfect sense. That calculates both how much time you spend in your home on business-related tasks and how you use your space in your home for your business. And it takes all of that information and kind of gloms it into a percentage. And we then apply that to your shared expenses that you use both for your home, for your family, for private use, and for your business to determine the tax deductions for your business. If that sounds scary, just know that the next hour plus we're going to walk through it in very simple ways. We're going to break it down. We're actually going to do examples. You're going to have time for questions, and we're going to figure it out. So, and just so you know, for that business-related tasks, that part that's underlined, your number one business-related task is childcare, obviously, but we all know that providers spend a ton of time once the kids go home or before they come working on those sorts of things that you need to do to keep your business running. Calculations that Tom Copeland did is about 14 to 15 hours a week that are tasks that providers are doing when children aren't even there, and you can imagine that that adds up pretty quickly. So, why does it even matter that you need to know this number? So if you don't know how to calculate time-space percentage, you can't be fully informed about how to make decisions for your business. This number impacts a lot of stuff financially if you live in the building where you provide care for kids. And so if you don't know how this number works, you actually can't have full kind of ownership and empowerment over your business. If you don't know how to calculate time space percentage, you don't know how to track your receipts properly to support your tax filings. And I know in April, taxes are on everybody's mind, so this is a great time for you to be paying attention to this topic. If you don't know how to calculate your time space percentage, you can't ensure that your taxes are being done correctly and that you are getting all of the write-offs you deserve. I've had so many stories of providers talking to me about this stuff, talking about how their tax people have actually bullied them into not accepting anything more than an hour a day for all those additional tasks. And so I actually have documentation that I can share with you that you can take back with your to your tax person to show that yes, indeed, you can take that full amount of time that you have in preparing your time space percentage. And then finally, if you don't know how to calculate time space percentage, you could be losing money, because what that means is you may not be applying this time space percentage to all of the different deductions that are available to you, and we want to make sure that you know as much as possible about how to write off those expenses so that you don't have to pay as much taxes if that's what works for you in your tax situation. So any questions right off the bat? If you have them, please type them in. Andrea is very carefully watching for that, because that's what she does, because she's excellent.
Nothing right now, but.
All right. We will move along then. So some folks need the big picture. Why do I have to do this calculation? Some of you might be cringing right now when you see a tax form. Let me just talk you off the ledge. It's okay. This is Form 8829, and this is where you document kind of how your business, how your home is used for your business. And so right here on line 7, come on, arrow, show up. There we go. That is where that calculation shows up. So if somebody else does your taxes and you want to know what your number is from last year, you can actually flip to Form 8829, look at line 7, and there will be a percentage there. That is the time space percentage that was calculated for that tax year. Every year you have to calculate a new time space percentage, because the amount of time that you spend working with children and doing business-related tasks is not going to be identical from year to year. The space portion of the percentage that you figure out for the formula may stay the same. If you use your house in the same way, you don't have any additions, you don't change using a bedroom one year and not using it the next, you know, the space portion of it might stay the same, but your time always changes, and so it's going to be calculated fresh every year. On average, it's around 30% for typical providers. If you have exclusive use space, if you work double shifts or have 24-hour care, then it's going to change, and it's going to be much higher. And as Tom Copeland always says, the higher that number is, the more careful your records should be to be able to protect yourself and empower you to take all of that deduction, because it really is what's coming to you based on your record keeping and what you actually provide for children and how you use your home. All right. Family child care tax law. Dun, 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 dun. I actually get really excited about family child care tax law, and I might be one of the only people that does, but let me love it for you. Family child care is treated differently than any other home-based business. So if my partner had, let's say, an architecture business in the home, he would have to, or she would have to, use that space exclusively for that home business and could not use it for anything else in order to be able to claim it on taxes. For family child care, they realized we use all of our home usually through the course of the day in very different ways, and it would be very hard to have just exclusive use space only. That just isn't practical. And so they do recognize exclusive use, but that's actually a different additional calculation that we'll go over tonight of how to calculate that. So just know that family child care tax law is a different set of in-home business laws than anybody else has. So if your friend has an in-home business, they say, well, my accountant doesn't do it that way. Good. They shouldn't be doing it the same way as family child care does for calculating use. The IRS does not care about your home per se, but how you use your home in your business. How often you use it, when you use it, what type of activity happens there, and how often it happens there. And so we'll be going over what constitutes regular use and all the things that go into the calculation so that you can feel comfortable that you understand how your space is being used. You could describe it to somebody else, and you could basically explain your calculations in a way that would make sense. And then the hours worked in your home are tracked because your home is looked like almost like a tool in your business. So the IRS knows that it is your home and your family is there, but because you have a business in it and you are able to then take deductions based on that, they need you to track those hours because it goes into the calculation that helps them determine how you're using that kind of tool, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a general background on what is the time space percentage, why one would even care about it, and kind of what impact tax law has on it, and kind of how the IRS is looking at this. I'm looking at Andrea to see if there's any questions, and she's shaking her head no. So either I have bored you all to death already, you're all terrified, or you are on the edge of your seat waiting to figure out how to do this. And I'm going to choose to think it's the latter. All right, time is the first part of the time space percentage. We're going to start on the left side of the screen and thinking this through. Hours with children, that is kind of the most basic and full chunk of time that we work in our home with kids. There are regular hours that you know that you're going to be open, usually 7:30 to 5:30, 6 to 6, whatever it is. If you are regulated, it will have on your certificate or on your license what those hours are. That your license hours or your certificate, your hours that are on your certification do not count. Like you can't just use your license hours and say, okay, that's when I'm open, so that's obviously when I'm doing care. It has to be more precise than that. You are allowed to use attendance sheets as long as they are marked with any closings. So like if you would happen to be closed for tomorrow for Good Friday, if you actually updated your attendance sheets to show that that was a holiday and that no children were there, you don't have to do double duty in tracking the hours that you have with kids in addition to your attendance hours. The IRS will look at attendance sheets as long as they're updated and show actual time from open to close. That's totally fine, which is so nice because that means you don't have to do double duty. It can be online. If it can be on computers, like if you have folks sign in that way, like the IRS does not care about that part. They just want it to be accurate and up to date. Irregular hours with kids. So all of those hours that happen, like, oh, hey, can I drop off my kid 15 minutes early because I have an early work meeting? Or, oh, hey, can my kid stay a few minutes late? Or, oh, I didn't ask you if my kid could stay late, but I just showed up late to pick them up. Those are all considered irregular hours. So you would want to keep documentation of any care that you provide before or after your typically scheduled hours with kids. If you do any weekend care that is not typical, track that. Sometimes there is overnight care that happens because of family emergencies or whatever. I would not recommend caring for children outside of your licensed or certified hours because that opens you up to liability issues, and you do not want to exceed the time frame that DCF has given permission for you to have children in your home. So just be really mindful of that. So that is kind of that first big chunk of your time using your home for your business is hours that you work with kids. Is there any questions about how you can track that, what qualifies, anything like that?
Not so far.
All right. I must have you all just enthralled, or this part is just really straightforward, and that's good. Moving to the right side of the screen is hours worked on business-related tasks, and these are when children are not present. So we all know that we do stuff to get ready for the day before the children come, and after that last kid goes home, there's always work to do. That time counts towards your overall work-related time with this business. You all know that because you live it every day. So keep written documentation of those tasks. Some tasks, just like the regular hours with kids, happen on a regular basis. Like every Monday I work on portfolios for an hour. Every Tuesday I work on my paperwork for the CACFP. On Wednesday I might be doing recipe and cooking for the week, and that happens after the kids go home. Whatever it is, as long as you are in your home. If you leave your home, that's a different thing, and we'll talk about that.
We do have a question here.
I love questions.
Can you use the Calendar Keeper book for attendance sheet documentation?
Yes, you can. I know people that love their Calendar Keeper and almost sleep with it because it is so useful for them as far as tracking all of the different aspects of this business. You can use the Calendar Keeper. You can use online. There is a component to the Calendar Keeper that you can go through Minute Menu, I believe. If you are a Week of Food Sponsor person, there is through cacfp.net a business practice module that you can track hours. They don't care how you do it. You just have to do it. And the more hours you claim, the more detailed you want your records to be.
Melody says she loves hers.
I don't doubt that.
Can we assume everybody knows what a Calendar Keeper is, Kelly?
I would not assume that, and so I'll just say Calendar Keeper is a tool that is printed by Red Leaf Press. It is an actual calendar, like a written paper calendar that you can put up on a refrigerator or a clipboard or a cork board. And in it, there are places for you to track children's attendance. There are places for you to track income and expenses. There are recipes that are often included. There are spots that if you have something happening after hours, like let's say a parent calls you and you have an interview with them for 35 minutes after that last kid goes home, there are places that you can jot that down so that it would be considered written documentation for this exact purpose. They come out new every year. They run about $20. And some providers, like I said, swear by them. I never use them. I just use little notebooks in different parts of my house. Because that's what worked for me. So the best system for documenting this stuff is the system you actually use. Whatever that is, it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be on the computer, it just has to be kept up to date regularly.
Well, and Cathedra says she uses the calendar from the food program, and it's awesome.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. Yay. And if there are other little tricks that you've learned that make your life easier, you can actually, instead of typing in a question, type in that comment, and other people can hopefully learn and see if there's something that they didn't know that you can share with them to make their life easier, because that is what this work is about.
So, Tara, the vendor for the Calendar Keeper is Red Leaf Press.
Yes, that is correct.
And then we do have a question from Debbie. So is the related tasks just provider tasks? What about spouse or family non-paid helping hours?
We are going to get there. You are good at this. In 2 clicks, I will answer that question, so stay tuned. All right.
So here's an interesting one. Sorry, this is related.
Back it up.
Leah, my licensor wrote me up for not using the attendance form from DCF. I would be afraid to use the calendar.
So Wisconsin licensing has attendance sheets that they provide and that you have to submit for shares and all that kind of stuff. So if that is your situation, use that. Some folks double up and they take that stuff and then transfer it into their Calendar Keeper so they can share that with their tax person, and it's kind of all in one place. But yes, if you have required forms that you need to be using, make sure that you use those. That's a good reminder. All right. I'm going to click along, and then Andrea is going to shoot off fireworks if there are more questions or comments that come up. You are not restricted to just 1 hour of time. I have heard this so many times. I've had providers in tears telling me their tax person will not let them claim any more hours, and it is not true. I don't know if you need to just tell them that Kelly sent you or whatever it is, have them talk to me. On page 68 of Tom Copeland's record-keeping book, which is, it's the record-keeping guide, the 9th edition, it's bright red. He actually just sent me a copy so I would have the most up-to-date information for y'all. Page 68 gives 3 different places where IRS publications have allowed or supported additional time beyond that 1 hour. So if folks want those publication titles, you can shoot me an email after this. If you need to get into that nitty-gritty with your tax person, I can get you those resources so that you are armed with the most up-to-date information that you are allowed to have more than 1 hour of time. Everybody knows that does this work, it takes way more than an hour a day to do all the things that need to get done. So, and then for the question we just had about family and other people doing things, make date night work in your favor. So, if you and your partner are both working on a task for the business, let's say repairing toys, at the same time, the IRS considers that a weird sort of date night, and you can only claim 1 hour of time. Like if the both of you are working from 6 to 7 p.m. on fixing toys. They say, nope, they're doing it together, they're doing the same thing. Clearly it's a weird sort of date. You just get the 1 hour. But if you work on toys from 6 to 7, and your partner or a child, like an adult child in your family or somebody else, volunteer, is working on something else in a different part of your home, doing a different task, that's fine. Or you can do it from 6 to 7, and then your partner can work from 7 to 8, and then you could each take credit for that time. But if you are doing it together at the same time, they do not consider that, you don't get to multiply your hours per number of person times number of hours, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just sit for a minute and see if any questions come up about that. I always say, you know, make your lists, do your separate tasks so that you can maximize that time if you want to get the most out of it. Did that answer your question, person who asked the question? I don't remember your name.
Debbie.
Debbie. We will
take that as a yes.
Okay. And in order to claim the time, you actually have to be on your property. You cannot count, like if you go to the coffee shop down the street to do your lesson planning or to do your tax paperwork, you actually cannot count that time. If you are doing business-related trips off your property, you can claim the mileage, but you cannot claim the time. So use that wisely. If you are on online classes and you are in your home and you are doing homework or you are actually logged into class doing classwork, you can count that as time because your education is actually making you a more valuable and professional person doing this work. It would make you potentially more valuable to your clients. People might want to come to your program because of that. So you can actually claim any time you're doing your homework. If you're doing professional reading in your home, if you get your awesome copy of the weekly newsletter and you sit down to read that, you can count that. But you have to be in your home. If you are working on your taxes, because we all know how long that takes, you can actually count the hours that you are gathering the receipts and stuff for your business portion of that and count that as part of your time. Not the time that you're doing your general personal side of your taxes, because you have to do taxes anyways, but anything that is related to the business portion of your taxes, you can count that.
And so how do you suggest that be documented?
That is a great question. The way that works best for you. And so some people use the calendar counters. I used these little notebooks. I had a house that had 3 floors that we used for different parts of the business. If it was record keeping versus where the child care happened versus where interviews happened with parents. So I had 3 little chubby notebooks, and I actually signed in and out when I had different tasks come up. If you have tasks that you do on a regular basis, you can actually set up a weekly written calendar that says, on Mondays I do this, Tuesdays I do this. You'd want to update it if there were any changes, like let's say this Wednesday you actually didn't do the thing you said you were going to do, you know, cross it off. Or if you spent more time next Wednesday to make up for it, you know, update it so that it's accurate. If you can please, Andrea, go to that resource that's on the bottom of the page. Youngstars actually created a resource on this whole time issue and how to best document it. And there's a kind of weekly calendar on there that you can see. So this top part is just examples of different tasks that you might not have considered that might count for those hours when children are not in care. So Andrea's going to slowly kind of go down. We're not going to read this whole thing, but just so you know this is available, and you can always email me and say, hey, can you send me the link directly, and I would be happy to do that. So here's an example on this page of a weekly calendar that someone can set up to show those hours. The IRS says that you can actually do 1 month of careful record keeping per 6 months out of the year. So that would be a total of 2 months out of the 12 months total, but you need to do one for the first 6 months and one for the second 6 months. Track that super carefully, and then you just use that times whatever those hours are times 6 for the rest for that 6-month period, if that makes sense, and then do it again for the second 6-month period. And you can use that to calculate your total time. Tom Copeland says if you're going to do it that way, pick your busiest months. There's nothing wrong with that because though you're actually being busy. I personally did every single day because I figured, you know what, things change so much, you never know exactly what happens, who's going to call, what you get sucked into for your work. So I chose to do it every day and then just tally it up. Again, I actually like this paperworky stuff. I'm weird that way, so I didn't look at it as a challenge. And I thought, you know what, even the time that I spend calculating my time for how much I worked, I get to count that time. So I looked at it as a little bit as a game, but some people are like, oh my gosh, Cal, get a life. I don't have that much time to do it that way, so I'm going to do the 1 month per 6-month period. Totally fine. The IRS is fine with that. You can set up a grid to sort of outline your different tasks that you do, and it's totally fine. So are there any questions on that sort of record keeping for the time, different tasks that work or might not work? I'm pausing to see if any questions are coming in.
Yes, takes a little time to type.
It does.
This is right on, I'm trying to figure out where this is. This is on the dcfwisconsin.gov website, so it's in the Youngstar section, obviously.
And they have recently revamped the website, and so if you had things bookmarked, if you click on them, they might redirect you in a few seconds to get to the new places where those things are living.
Well, so here's just one more question. So just for review, the Youngstar needs a specific format and timing?
Youngstar does not need a specific format or timing. What you need to do is have an accurate format or timing. So you do have to show that you are tracking your time for Youngstar. Like that is one of the requirements. So for the Youngstar purposes, the minimum amount that you can do that is that 1 month per 6-month period. And the IRS will also accept that for calculating your time over the course of the year. You can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it monthly, or you can do it for that 1 month of super careful record keeping, and then you multiply that times the other 5 months of that 6-month period to get your total. But you're right, you do have to show your tracking hours for Youngstar because it's a tax requirement that you have this information. Alrighty.
All right.
Moving right along. Now the space. Space, the way that the IRS talks about space is that it is regularly used for business. Knowing what that means will help you determine how you end up making your time space calculation. So the IRS considers regularly using a space if you use it at least 3 times a week. So you may have a garage that you have stuff stored in, and your car is there, but you might go a whole week, especially when it's like 50 below out and 27 inches of snow, that you don't actually go in or out of that garage. But it's there, and it's actually holding your stuff that you use for your business. That would be considered regular use. It doesn't mean you actually have to set foot in that space. It is storing the stuff that's considered use. The space does not actually have to be accessible to children. And there was an argument that Tom Copeland took on in tax court about that there was a furnace area and a laundry area that a provider was claiming, and the IRS was challenging it because it wasn't use, like kids couldn't play there, obviously, because that wouldn't be a safe space for them. And the argument went that the furnace and the laundry are still regular parts of space that you need to use for your business. You can't run a family child care space without a furnace and without laundry. And so the IRS actually wrote up that that is fine and that you can have space in your house that kids never touch, but that still can be considered used for your business. Usually it's storage spaces. It can include garages and outbuildings. You should not include like sidewalks and like the outer landscapey bits of your house, but your garage definitely holds things that you use for your business, so that it makes sense that that would be a place that you would use, a space that you would consider in your calculation. So you don't want to include your lawn, don't include your driveway, your sidewalks, outdoor play spaces, gardens or patios, or anything that is strictly personal for your home. It is part of the structure of your building, like a porch, an attached deck, a carport, or a garage. Whether it is attached or unattached, those spaces you can count. So I'll just pause. I don't think there'll be any questions about that, but if you do have questions, you can always pop up a question here or shoot me an email later.
Well, so here's a question. I use my attic for storing all the extra baby furniture when I'm not using it, like extra high chairs, etc. Does that count?
Yep.
So even though she's not using them, they're being stored.
They are using them because a regular part of her business is having those materials available for children when she needs them. So that would be regular and required equipment for this business. So you can absolutely count that space.
And so just to clarify, a porch is okay, right? You said a deck too.
Let me go back and find. So you want to include spaces that are part of the structure of the building. So if the porch or if you have an attached deck, you would count that. If you had some sort of little gazebo structure off of your home that was not attached, you would not include that. Basically, it is it attached to the house, then it's included. The only exception to that is if the garage is not included, you can count garage space. But don't count your lawn, a driveway, a sidewalk, or a patio, it says. You should not count. So they're separating a patio, which is flat and outdoor space, off your property with a porch, which is actually attached to your house. I got the thumbs up from Andrea, so that sounds that all is good. All right, so your kitchen, you use that a million times a week. Bathrooms, that's used a million times a week. Bedrooms, depending on how you use them, may or may not be counted as regular use. If you have storage in a room, like I said, whether it's the attic, it's a closet in a bedroom, you can count that space. And I just want to double check. So if you have, let's say, a bedroom that children never go into, let's say it's one of your kids' rooms and they're very private, they don't want daycare kids in there, and you're fine with that, but you store materials in that closet of that bedroom, you can actually count the entire bedroom space because the closet is considered part of the room, which I found really interesting. And that was, I just found that out from Tom Copeland in researching for this time space webinar. So the closet use basically gives you credit to use that whole room for the time space percentage calculation. So I always tell people store something in every single room.
And so a shed that's not attached, located in the backyard, used to store strollers and outside toys.
That, from my understanding of how they have it calculated, that would not be part of the house and it would be unattached. I can always submit that to Tom Copeland and double check, because he does say outbuildings, so if it's a shed, that might be that consideration. So I'm going to take a note and follow up on that, just so we're sure.
Let's make sure. Because it does seem like that's an outbuilding.
Right. And that's the cool thing is often we will also have little Q&As that come out from after these webinars that then we can share as well, so folks have those resources and follow-ups.
And we'll send a follow-up email with a link to the recording and things like that, and so we'll include the links that we have mentioned here, and hopefully any outstanding questions.
I love having homework when I leave these things. It makes me excited. All right, so that kind of covers that regular use. Exclusive use, I'll tell you the IRS is super, super, super picky, and the rules are super strict. So if you have a space in your home that is only used for childcare, you don't have your mother-in-law sleep there over Easter weekend because she's coming to visit, like that doesn't count because it is no longer exclusive use. If somebody uses it for some other purpose other than childcare during the entire year, you cannot count it. You are allowed to walk through the space to get to other space, and that does not jeopardize the exclusive use. You cannot sit down and read the newspaper on a Sunday in that space unless you are reading the New York Times new article on child care wages and what that does for the state of Wisconsin, whatever it is. Like if it's related to child care, you can sit in that room and read it. If it is not related, like if it's a fishing magazine, that basically jeopardizes the exclusive use, and you can no longer count that space as exclusive use. So if you're going to set that space aside, be really clear about how it's used, and this goes for other people in your family too. So if you have a partner, if you have kids, if you have in-laws that live with you, whoever, they cannot be in that space unless it is child care related. Super picky.
So I do have a question here. So what about my closet that I store business shirts for advertising purposes?
So that you could count as regular use if it is a closet only for those shirts and nothing else is ever stored in there except business-related things. You have no personal things in that closet. You could count that. That would be a case, though, I would not, if it was part of a bedroom, I would not count the whole bedroom because I don't know that the IRS would consider that exclusive use. That would be a really assertive classification of that space. So if you wanted to count just that closet 3x4 or whatever it was, I would say you could probably get by with that because that's only used for that business-related stuff. But I would be pretty careful about that one.
And then what about here's a follow-up to the same one. So Leah says, I meant it for regular use, so the closet.
Yes, if you have storage that is things with your logo on it that are for your business, that is absolutely considered regular use. And in that case, you can count the bedroom that is attached to it or whatever room is attached to it as part of regular use, absolutely.
And so here's a question about a breezeway. My breezeway that attaches the garage and the house where the families enter and hang their coats and shoes, does that count?
Yes. It is attached to your house. It is part of the structure of the building. And it connects, I'm picturing it as connecting your garage and your home, and that would be considered part of the structure.
And so I understand the difference in what's regular and exclusive, but what's the difference as far as the taxes go?
Oh, I love it. You guys lead me right into the next things. So as far as taxes, there's an additional calculation that happens for the space that is exclusively used, and that gets tacked on to your regular use portion of the percentage. So we're going to walk through an exclusive use calculation just so you can actually see that in action, but it can significantly bump up your time space percentage. So like I said earlier, most providers average around 30%, 30 to 35%. I had 600 square feet of exclusive use space in my home that was about 1,800 square feet, maybe a little bit bigger, and my time space percentage was 55.5%. which meant 55.5% of the vacuum cleaner I purchased, I got to write off. 55.5% of my utilities. So it can be a significant bump. But again, they're really strict about it, and so you don't want to take on the IRS, and then if they come in and see you're using that space differently, because they will then go back and look at your returns and say, no, you can't actually claim that exclusive use, and it will impact your tax situation. So if you claim that space, like you should be able to defend it. Like in my case, I didn't have children of my own, And so there was nobody else that used that space when I shut the door at the end of the day. It was very easy for me to defend that against the IRS. We had 2 other levels of our home that we lived on that had everything we needed, so we didn't have to depend on that space for bathroom, laundry, anything like that. It was completely separate. And then finally, there's a caveat. Whoops, back it up. That little red box at the bottom. If you do not live in the space where you provide care, you do not calculate time space percentage for that building. So basically everything that happens in that space, all the expenses would be 100% business. You may still calculate a time space percentage for your actual home if you are doing things like the paperwork and the lesson planning while you are in the home you live in, whether if it's separate from where you do care. So if you are interested in that, you will want to check out page 77 of the 9th edition of Tom Copeland's Record Keeping Guide, and he has more complete information about the pros and cons of doing space where you live versus moving your program out of the space where you live in his Money Management and Retirement Guide. And remember that that can vary by county where you live as far as zoning, if that's even legal. So just know that that is not even always a possibility in the state of Wisconsin. Some places you actually are required to live where you provide care. But sometimes people always ask, I don't actually live in the house where I do the care. How does that work? So, all right. If we are going to actually sit down and figure out your time space percentage, I have put together a list of the things you will need. Given that tax time is right around the corner, these could very well be things you might already have ready to go because you have your tax prep stuff. All the hours you worked last year. So the calculations go on a tax year status. So basically you would be looking back at 2014 for that tax return year, because that's the year we're working on, every hour you worked in 2014. And it would be more than you can actually imagine. The square footage for each room in your home. And I say house, it could also be apartment. It doesn't actually have to be a standalone single-family home. There's no requirement that that's necessary in order to get these tax benefits. So you will need the total square footage of your home. And then you will also need documentation of which space is used regularly for business. And we actually have an example of how to create that documentation. So let's do an actual example. All right? So does anybody actually have exclusive use? Could you raise your hand if that's your situation? Do you have any hands going up, Andrea?
Yes.
All right.
About just a couple. I'd say fewer than 8.
Oh, that's actually quite
but
a few
here's
for
more.
the number of the group.
Okay.
All right, and then if you want to drop your hands, and then I want to see the hands for the folks that are they just have regular use, no exclusive use set aside for their home.
So that's a lot more hands.
Okay. So the first example we're going to do is an exclusive use, and we have a second example that is not exclusive use, so that way whatever your situation, you will have an example recorded here that you can kind of walk through. The one thing I want to remind you is that for figuring out the time portion, there are 8,760 hours in a year. So that is if you work from January 1 through December 31st of 2014. 24 hours a day. That's how many hours you would work.
Will you say that again?
Sure will. So there are 8,760 hours in a year.
Wow.
Which is crazy. So starting January 1 at midnight, 12:01 a.m. through December 31st midnight, that's how many hours they are. Not everybody starts their business January 1st at midnight, 12:01 a.m. So if you have to do your calculation for a partial portion of the year, you would just have to do that starting from the day you opened your business for how many days of the year are left until the end of the December 31st times 24. So if you need help figuring out what that would be, you are free to email me and say, this is when I started my business, how would I calculate that? For example, Go ahead. Is there a question?
Well, so Laura asked this question a bit ago. So if I claim exclusive space now, can I change that in the future if I choose to let my family use that space?
Absolutely. That's one reason why you would also have to recalculate your time-space percentage every year, is because you may change the way you use your space. So it's not like the standard mileage rate where you can't go back and forth. Like you actually can say this year it's going to be exclusive use, next year it's not, go back to exclusive use, that's totally fine. So in our example here, we have a house, a home, an apartment, 2,000 square feet total. They have 200 square feet, let's say a small bedroom, a small playroom that is only for the child care program. So here comes the math. Dun, 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 dun. So one room, 2,000 square feet. It's used 100% for business. The remaining 1,800 square feet is used regularly for business and personal use. We're just going to give you the time percent right now so that we don't have to add that calculation, because I'm not going to sit down and add up every single minute this fake provider worked. So to show you how I came up with that fake 40%, I assumed this provider worked 50 weeks out of the year, 55 hours during those weeks, for a total of 2,750 hours. So 55-hour work week is not unusual for a provider. And then we're going to add up those irregular hours and those after-hour duties. And again, having 750 plus hours of irregular care duty time and after-hour duty is not unusual for providers. So the total comes out to 3,504 hours. So that is 2,750 hours plus the 754. And then to show you how that turns into a percentage, you take that 3,504 hours, which is all the hours that provider worked, divide it by 8,760, because that's the entire year that was possible that she could have worked if she chose not to sleep, eat, or do anything else. And it turns out to 0.4. And to turn that into a percentage, you move the decimal place to the right 2 points and add the percentage mark. So that gives you a quick breakdown of how that time percentage gets calculated. So you can actually go back and look at how many hours you worked last year. If you did care for the entire year of 2014, add up your regular hours, those additional hours and after-hour duties when the kids were gone, divide it by that 8760, and that will give you your time portion of the time percentage. So you just hang on to that number, and it's just going to hold there for a little minute because we'll plug it in a little bit later. So to start with the space portion of the time space, you will want to take the exclusive use space and divide that by the total. So the exclusive use, that's hard to say really quickly. Exclusive use space is 200 square feet, so you will divide that by 2,000 because that's the total amount that this home has, and that gives you 10%. So far no one has jumped off a ledge because we're doing math. That's good. Hang in there because we're actually going to, and there's that little exclusive use spot. So just to show again how you get that decimal point over to get the percentage, because I know it's been a long time since we've had to figure out how to create percentages. And I don't want the math to feel scary for anybody. So you take that where the point is for the 0.010, sorry, you move it 2 spots to the right, and then you add that decimal, you add the percentage, and that's how you make a percent. And again, I know in a webinar it's probably a little bit trickier to ask math questions or anything like that, so if you want to sit down and actually figure out how to do this with your actual square footage space, I can help you with that after the webinar at a different point. We can set up a phone call or whatever you need to get that done. No one has to do math alone.
And so back to the hours, sorry, so how do those non-paid extra hours of volunteer work in there in terms of calculating your total hours?
So if you have quote-unquote volunteer hours, does that mean you're volunteering at the YMCA off your property? You can't count those volunteer hours for your work time. If you're talking about all those extra hours you work that you're not directly getting paid for after the kids go home, that would be what was considered, let's see if I can back it up here, where it says in the bottom right corner, irregular and after-hour duties. That's part of that 754 hours in this example.
Okay, or like when your partner is helping you fix the toys. Yes.
Yep, that would be considered what I termed after-hour duties for this example.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to jump ahead back to where we were, do the math, excuse me. All right, so now we need to figure out the space percentage for the rest of the house that's just regular use. So you would take the let me start over. You would take the 1,800 and divide that by the total amount of space that is available, which is that 2,000. And that gives you 90%. And again, we can show our work. So 1,800 divided by 2,000 is 0.90 or 90%. So right now we've done 3 different calculations. We've done the 40% for the time, we've done the 10% for the exclusive use, and we have 90% for the rest of the space. So those things are going to all come together in the next calculation to show how that gets all calculated. So just know that you're going to hang on to those numbers and push them all together coming up here. Come on, Teresa. All right. So step 3 is you're going to multiply the percentages from step 2 by the time percent. Wait, did I skip? Nope, that's right. So the 90%, which was the regular use, times the time percent is 36%. So 90% is how the regular use of the house is the percentage. You use 90% of your house for regular use, and you're going to multiply that against your time, which is that 40%. And that's going to come up with 36%. So again, here's where we're going to show our work. 0.9, which is the same as 90%, times 0.4 is 0.36, or move your decimal over twice, and you get 36%. So if you did not use that 200 square feet for anything, let's say that was never available to the kids, we would just stop right here, and that would be your time space percentage. But because you have that exclusive use, used in a very special way, we get to actually add that. Here's just showing some more of the math, so that's not freaking you out. So we're going to take that 36%, which is the regular way you use your home, against your time percentage, and add that 10% on flat up. Like they just get to tack it on. So it bumps it from 36% to 46%. So just having 10% of your home as exclusive use in this situation bumped that provider's time space percentage up 10%. So they get an additional 10% write-off on their utilities, their property tax bill for their home, the mortgage interest, all that stuff. So it adds up over time. So, and I'm just going to show you, these are all the calculations kind of without the picture. So the time space percentage was given at 40%. We saw how to calculate that. Step 1 was to do the exclusive use space, which ended up being that 10%. Step 2 was doing the regular use space calculation, which was the 90%. Step 3 was using your regular use percent for your space times your time percent, which gives us that 36%. And then you add on your exclusive use almost like a cherry on top to get you to the 46%.
Wow. I'm trying to think of another calculation where you multiply 1% by another percent.
That was not the webinar I prepared for.
I've never heard, I mean, in my 51 plus years, I've never heard of, I'm not a family provider, obviously. That kind of boggles my mind. But I get it now that you explained it.
So you're basically doing a percent of the house and you're multiplying it against a percentage of the year, right? How did you use the space and how did you use your time? And then when you bring those two together through that multiplication, that's the kind of weighted value of your time and your space together for the IRS, if that makes sense. Andrea's getting a total education tonight. I can see her brain hurting.
It's easier for me to think about when you translated it into decimals.
Sure.
Like 0.9 is easier for me to work with in my head as opposed to 90%.
So for me, 90% is like an almost full cup. And if I think about my house, like I almost use all of it for childcare, and then this other spot I use 100%, whoops, hit the mic, completely. So that's one reason why I showed the picture, because some people are visual that way. Some people just want the words and the calculations. So whatever works for you, when we have our conversations after this, you can just say, that worked for me or that didn't work for me, and I can help translate this content into that other format too. That doesn't scare me. So we have another example, or do we have another question?
Just a question going back to the hours, which is how do you calculate the total hours possible for start dates after the beginning of the year? So I'm thinking she means if you're not open for the whole year.
So when I moved to Iowa, I started as a Head Start provider and then quit that job, and in the middle of the summer opened up my family child care business September 2nd of 2000, and I think it was 3 way back then. Oh my goodness. And so for that first tax year, I had a W-2 from my group child care job, and then I had to do this calculation from September 2nd through December 31st. So basically you can count how many days are there from September 2nd to December 31st. You'd count each day and then multiply that by 24. And that would give you the number you would use instead of that 8,760, because that's for the whole year. You would just use the number of hours from September 2nd basically to the end of the year. And so if you want to email me and say my start date was June 31st or September 2nd or whatever it is, I can help you calculate what that would be specifically from that point on to the end of the year. I actually love doing math. I'm happy to help with that.
And Tara says thank you.
You're welcome.
She's going to do that.
I love it. I love helping providers figure this out so that they get an understanding for their very own business how this stuff works. So I will be looking for your email.
And Laura says random question. Is weekly, so this is back to time. Hours worked. Is weekly yard maintenance of playground considered time?
So any maintenance that you would have to do because you just own a house, you cannot count. So if you're mowing your grass, you got to do that anyways. Otherwise, you'll probably get a citation from your city. If you have to clean up your play yard because you have kids, then probably not. If you are spending extra time because you're planting flowers in the front part of your house so it looks pleasant for your clients, for curb appeal, you can count that time. If your partner is getting up at 5 in the morning to shovel to make sure that everything is clear before your clients come in the door, you can count that time because that person would not be shoveling if you did not have a business in your home. So if it is something that you are doing because of your business, then yes. But if it's something you would have to do anyways, then you can't actually count that time. So if you have to paint your kitchen because you hate the color, you can't count that. If you are painting the kitchen because you have 8 hands, little hands running along the baseboard every single day, 3 times a day for meals, and you have these little brown streaks or the paint's worn off, then you would have to paint that because your business is requiring that repair and maintenance. So you have to use your judgment a little bit. I would never claim every single paint job I do to be because of my business because the IRS is going to say, yeah, right. Right? So understand that some of the wear and tear on your house is going to happen just because you live there, and then some of it's going to happen because you have all these extra bodies in there because of your business. And then make a judicious split between what you claim that is just personal and then what you claim as part of your business repairs.
Well, so yearly landscaping would count?
Yeah, if you're doing it because you want your house to be beautiful for your clients and curb appeal so that when somebody does a drive-by, it doesn't look junky and they go, ooh, that looks really nice, I'd want my kid to go there, you can count that.
And so if you paint your daycare playroom, you can count that.
If it's exclusive use, you can count it 100%. If it's not exclusive use space, then I would count maybe every other time you paint it. Or if you have damage on the wall because a kid took a Sharpie to the wall, take a photograph of the Sharpie mess on the wall, date it, and then when you have your paint repair materials that you had to buy to cover up that spot, then you could claim that as 100% because it was directly related to damage that was done because of the business.
Leo says, I have 1,100 exclusive daycare space, but my family walks through it to do laundry in the back of the basement or to go to the storage area. Is that still exclusive? So
if they're just walking through it, that's totally fine. If they sit down and start playing, or if they play there on the weekends, or if they have friends stay over and they sleep in that space, then you cannot. But if they are strictly walking through it, you are golden and you can use that space as exclusive use. All right, so here's another option. So this program, I was going to have you go through and have to interview me and figure out how all the different spaces use, but we're moving through our time, and so I'm going to just kind of walk you through things that you would need to pay attention to. So you would need to know how the bedrooms are actually used. So one bedroom, child's bedroom, says no children access, but they use it for nap. So if they're using it for nap at least 3 times a week, that would be considered regular use. For the master bedroom, it says no children access, but there is storage for ECE books and materials in the closet, which means I can use that space as regular use. For the sunroom bonus room, up on the top, it says kids not allowed in, used for parent interviews and to do paperwork and parent calls after hours. So if I'm doing that at least 3 times a week, I can actually count that as regular use. Pantry, kitchen, bathroom, laundry, we all know, playroom, that all gets used regularly. The garage is considered regular use because you have the lawnmower in there, you have seasonal materials, your car is in there, and you use your car for business regularly. So I actually did all of the calculations for the different square footages in that space. So this is a very small little property, 609 square feet total. So this would be a way that you could actually show the documentation that you would need to show for your time-space percentage for your tax folks, is to do a write-up like this on graph paper. Some people have documentation from when they purchased their house that has all the different room measurements. You can use that. There is no set documentation that is required that you must use to show your square footage. So just whatever you use, you have to have at least some sort of written documentation. So here's a form that you could actually use. That is the information that is typed up from the graph that I just did, so that you could show the dimensions of the room, the total square footage. You could document whether it's regular use, yes or no, or exclusive use, and then we can fill that in. So, come on, clicker. So here's me pretending I'm going through my interview process with my tax person. Yes, this is all regular use. Yes, yes. Oh, look, the office. Nope, actually my partner has an architecture business, and so we are never in that office. That's his alone. Nobody touches it. I don't store anything in there, so that is not actually part of my business use. So that's how I could show that. Come on, clicker, be nice to me. There's people listening. So going all the way through, we're going to actually do the math. It comes up to 574 square feet of regular use and 609 square feet of total space that's available. So this is me going through and actually showing you how to do the math. Oh, just a note, hallways can have their own measurement and be counted as a room. So if you have a hallway that takes you down kind of the spot where your bedrooms might be or into another space, you can actually count a hallway as a room and count that as part of your square footage. That was also research that came up as I was studying all this for you. All right. So you will see the graph that we filled out about how much space is in there. So the total use for business is 574. We're going to divide that by 609, and that gives us 94.2%. So we use 94.2% of our house for regular use. We're going to give you the time percentages. They average 65 hours a week, caring for kids and for all the other stuff we have to do. And so we'll put the math out there for that. So the number of hours that the home is used for business, 65, times the hours of a week, 168. So, and if you want to do it for the 52 weeks out of the year, I did the math under there too so that you could see that it would be 3,380 hours per week divided by that 8,760 hours for the whole year, which turns out to about 38.6%. So the bottom level shows the time calculation, that 386. That 38.6 is the time percentage, and we're going to multiply that by the space calculation, which is that 0.942, or the 94% of the house that she's using, which gives us 0.3636. To turn that into a percentage, you can multiply it by 100. Come on, clicker. So that gives us 36.36% for a time-space percentage. Some of you are going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so just know that I can actually walk you through this with your very own dimensions of your very own room, the very totals of the hours you actually worked, and we can plug it into this formula so it will make sense so you will know your time-space percentage. So don't be scared. That's how we want you to feel. We can do it. You are not alone in this. So I'm pausing to see if there are any questions kind of about the calculations. This one is actually a little easier because you don't have the additional calculation of that time-space percentage at the end that you kind of tagged on like that little cherry of that 10%. So this is a little bit easier as far as the number of things you have to multiply by the number of other things. So I'm looking at Andrea to see if there's any questions coming in. At this point, people have either given themselves paper cuts to death so that they don't have to think about it anymore, or they're feeling good that they have some ideas of how this thing works. So why does it matter, right? So applying that 36.36% to real life, or why, yeah, where sharing really matters for family child care folks. So you have to ask yourself some questions. When you're purchasing something, who actually uses this item on a regular basis? Is it going to be my family, or is it going to be the daycare? Because that actually matters. If it is an item that you use for your personal family that no child care business ever touches it for any reason whatsoever, then you are not applying that 36% for a write-off. But that very rarely happens, that you purchase something and it is never touched by your family child care business for any reason. Right? Like you might buy a hammer to go, oh, I want to hang this picture in my master bedroom where kids never go and I never use for business. But 2 weeks later, you might be using that hammer to repair a toy. So it doesn't matter why you buy it. Whoops, it matters how you use it in that course of time. Right? You might have purchased it for a personal use, but the business ends up using it or quote-unquote touching it for a business-related reason. So then you would then be able to write off 36% of it. And you may have duplications of things, right? Like I have a tub of stuff that is my clothes from when I traveled to India, and it is sitting in my cedar closet, and it just sits there, right? It never is for my business. But guess what? I have a ton of tubs that I use for storage for my business, and so then I would be applying either 100% write-off because it is used exclusively for my business, or some of the tubs are used at certain times of the year for stuff that is related to my business. I have to haul stuff back and forth to a special event or whatever it might be. So basically, when you're purchasing something, think about, will my business ever use this item? If any chance that it's going to, there's a good chance you can then apply that 36% to write off when it comes to tax time for deductions. But then it actually has to be used by your business sometime during that tax year to be able to write it off.
So the tubs cost you $10. What do you write off? 36% of $10.
Right, so if I buy the first tub just for me and I never use it for my business for any reason whatsoever, 0% of that $10 gets written off. But for each of the other tubs that are used regularly for my business and my family, I would then write 36% off, or about $3.63. Now that times 3 tubs is now all of a sudden about $10, which is like getting one of those tubs for free. Tom Copeland will say, never, 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 never buy something just for the write-off. You are always better off not spending the money in the first place. But if you need something for your business, and it's a reasonable purchase, right, like it's something you need that you will actually use and it makes your life easier, then make sure you save that receipt so that you can write it off. And for some folks, you might not take advantage of all of the write-offs you have because it doesn't make sense in your tax situation. Like that's up between you and your tax person and your financial planner. But you would want to have all of the documentation available so that you could defend writing off all of it if you wanted to or needed to. So, items that use time, space, percentage. So here's a partial list of things that are impacted by this 36% write-off. Your utilities. So thinking about cable, if you have internet connected to your cable that you use in your online researching stuff or online for classes, your heat, your electricity, garbage if that's part of it, water if that's part of it, all of that gets touched by this 36% write-off in this case for this provider. Your number might be higher or might be lower depending on your situation, so just know that that's going to flex, and it's going to flex a little bit each year based on that new calculation you do. Your mortgage interest or rent. So I know I pay thousands of dollars in mortgage interest when I was doing family child care, and a portion of that, for me, 55.5%, I got to write off. So it can make a huge difference. When I was doing family child care one year, on paper, I brought in over $55,000. When it came to actually paying taxes and after all of my deductions and write-offs, I only made $11,000 on paper when I deducted all of my write-offs. So I had over $40,000, almost $40,000 that I was able to write off because of knowing A, what's deductible, and B, how to apply this time-space percentage. So it can add up. Homeowners insurance, including flood insurance, if you're required to have that, you would be able to write off. Paper goods, toilet paper, paper towels, we know we go through hundreds of dollars of those materials. So make sure you're writing off what you can. Toys, if you have your own children who play with them. So if you buy a toy for the child care business and your kids play with it, then you can only write off the time-space percentage. If you have toys that you purchase, if you don't have kids of your own, or if you have toys that are only in your exclusive use space and your own kids are never in that space after hours, these toys are completely 100% for your business in there, then you can write it off at a more aggressive, that full 100% business use. But if you've got kids in the house, you are better off with the less aggressive write-off stance of doing your time-space percentage. Art materials, same thing, kind of with the toys. If you have your own kids that are touching them and using them, chances are you want to do the less aggressive write-off at the time-space percentage versus 100%. If you don't have kids of your own, and you could show, nope, these art materials are for my kids, they use those after hours, these are for the business, then you would be able to defend that position. Cleaning materials. Goodness knows we spend so much money on kitchen supplies, household items, and cleaning materials. Office items. So printer, cartridges, paper, all that good stuff. And some services. So if you have carpet cleaning done, again, if it's because a child in your child care program took a Sharpie to your carpet, may that never happen to you, and you have to get it cleaned, that's when you would take a photograph and write it off at 100%. But if you're just doing general cleaning, you can apply your time-space percentage to a portion of those cleanings because it is due to your business that you need to be doing that. So just know that this can add up to thousands and thousands of dollars. It may seem like a pittance, like, okay, fine, I can write off $3.63 of a $10 tub. But when you think about all of the things that you purchase over the course of a year that your business touches, it's actually really a lot of money. And just a note, do not ever apply your time-space percentage to food purchases. If you are doing a special event like a birthday party for a kid, you can write that off as 100% if you buy that cake because it's a special event. But if you are doing meals for children, that goes under the standard meal allowance, and you don't ever do your time-space percentage to food. And yes.
So a couple questions.
I
So
love questions.
if you use 100% of your house, can you just
Yep.
use your entire square footage of your home?
Yep, and that makes that calculation really easy. So it is not unusual for that portion of that calculation to be 100% for providers who use 100% of their business for regular use, or 100% of their home for regular use.
And just a couple questions about toys. What about grandchildren?
Same thing. If you have grandkids that are playing with the toys in addition to child care program children, then the smarter, more easily defensible write-off would be the time-space percentage versus 100%.
And what about toys? Holly says, what about girls' toys that your teenage son never uses?
So if you could make the argument to an IRS auditor sitting in your house going, look, I have a 13-year-old boy, he is not going to be playing with princess stuff, then I would say that that seems somewhat reasonable. You would then want to show the IRS auditor, here are the toys that my son does play with, right? Whatever it is that 13-year-old boys like to play with, there is stuff that's appropriate for him.
And you mentioned homeowners insurance, but what about, does renter's insurance count?
Yep, sure does. This is so fun.
And so I'm trying to sift through these. So if you need to repair your washer, I wash daycare clothes too, or your refrigerator or your stove, does that count? So I think Melody means the repair bill.
So if you are buying a new appliance, you would write it off at the time-space percentage because your business is using that. If you have to do a repair, if you can show, quote-unquote, that it was because of your business, like a kid threw something into the toilet, and I've had this happen where, you know, they tried to flush something that wasn't really flushable, and so the plumber had to come, that could be 100% because it was directly related. If it is a wear and tear and it just happened that, you know, you wash personal clothes, you wash daycare clothes, and it just happened to poop out on Thursday, then that would be a point where you would apply that time-space percentage to the repair because it's partially the business's fault and it's partially just the regular day-to-day use of your family.
And so why do you not use food as a write-off?
You do write off your food. Absolutely. You just use a different method. You use the standard meal allowance for that write-off. And if you want more information on that, you can email me and I can get you the rates that they, every year they come up with new rates that breakfast, lunch, and snack are reimbursed to you through the food program. And if you're not on the food program, you can still write off your food at those meal levels. So we can have that conversation, absolutely.
That's all for now. Oh.
All right.
How many more slides are there, Kelly?
This is the last slide, and then I have the contact slide of where people can get a hold of me.
Beautiful.
So we are right on time, yeah.
Well, so wait, quick, sorry, one more question. Yeah. So how do you calculate damage done to your property done by daycare children?
So would it be damage to the home or a structure?
Yeah, Mary, can you say a little more? Do you have something in mind?
Remember confidentiality. Don't name names of those little guys. Uh-oh.
Somebody's suggesting the floor. I mean, I'm trying to think damage
Yep.
done. Somebody breaks something.
Yep, so if they break, let's say they destroy one of your lamps, right? You can then buy a replacement lamp at 100% write-off because you are replacing something that was damaged due to your business. I would take a picture of the damaged lamp with the date and what happened. It can be an accident for a kid, or it can be, you know, if they're actually being disrespectful to property, it gets written off the same way. So I actually had a dishwasher that decided to leak all over my kitchen floor. In my home when I did family childcare, I had the ugliest kitchen floor ever. We had been talking about replacing it for years, and we were just lazy and never got around to it. It was ugly parquet. The dishwasher went, warped all of it, and so we were lucky in that we got to write off the replacement cost of the flooring at 100% because it was emergency repair, and we had to have that replaced for the business to be able to be open. So not that I'm saying run your dishwashers crazy or anything like that, but there are points where because of emergency repairs or damage that was done because of a child or a parent in your program, you can actually write those off in kind of certain special situations. So the record keeping guide goes through all those different kind of nuances, but if you ever want to email me and say here's what happened, I'm happy to talk you through that. Are we ready for the?
Yes, Mary says yes. Thank you. That answers my question.
All right.
That's good.
So receipts. Receipts are money. Treat them like cash. Do not wad them up and stuff them in your purse and never look at them again. Every time someone hands you your receipt that you are purchasing something for your business, you say thank you and you think in your head, cha-ching, because this will help you for your tax write-offs. So this is an example of the way that I would tag my receipts when I was doing family childcare. You actually go through and tag if it's a shared expense. I would use a TS for shared. If it was a business 100%, I would use a B. And if it was a personal item, I would use a P. Sometimes receipts have these crazy codes so that you don't actually know what the item is. And so you will see that I actually went through and wrote in fabric softener or paper towels. Because in 3 years, if I get audited, I actually have to know what that thing was that I was writing off. So it is fine to scribble up your receipts so that you can actually make them more usable. So I identified the different categories. I had a code. I used that code all the time to make sure I was consistent. Excuse me. There you go. Be consistent. As you can tell, being successful with this kind of paperworky stuff, having a system and being consistent matters. Do it right away. I would actually sit in the parking lot at Target and fill in these items right away so that if I couldn't remember what something was, I could look back and go, oh yeah, that's fabric softener. That's what that is for $3.99 because I just remembered purchasing it. Don't wait because you will not remember. Receipts are like money. Treat them well.
So Jacqueline says she scans receipts to the computer and saves them on a flash drive.
Awesome, because these thermo papers fade. So if you want to scan, some people take pictures. I don't care what you do with them as long as there is some way that you can preserve that image so that you, if you need it in 3 years, you have it available to you. And then you can also total up these categories of purchase if you are on Youngstar and that's part of your life. Paying attention to those expenses is part of the record-keeping requirement, and so this can be easily transferred into that. If you do paper goods, art supplies, whatever it is, you can actually tag it kind of once for that tax purpose of who, is this a business use, a shared use, or personal use, but also is it a paper good, is it art supplies, is it whatever else, office stuff, and total it up that way for your expenses for Youngstar that you can track. So receipts are money, treat them well. And then finally, the most important slide. This is how you find me. I have a business phone number. You can call it anytime, day or night. I turn it off at night so it won't wake me up. If you are up at 3 a.m. doing your paperwork and you have a question, you can totally leave me a voicemail. I have email, kmatthews@wisconsinearlychildhood.org. If you email me, put in the subject line like webinar follow-up because I always answer those first. Don't tell anybody else that. but those get like high priority when I go into my inbox. If you can't tell, love doing this. So please, please don't be shy about asking questions, saying, here's my personal situation, here are some of my numbers, what do I do, how do I do it? I would be delighted to sit down and help you figure this out. Yay!
Yay. All right, so I have 8 o'clock. So
Me too. Ding, ding.
I am going to stop the recording.